business ownership complicates a divorce, it is an asset in a divorce, right? And we talk about dividing assets. Well, if you're talking about a house, there's a way to divide the house, right? Who wants to live in the house? Can they afford the house? If you're talking about a car, cool. Can they afford the car? Do they know how to drive a stick? But when it comes to the business, it is a fluid investment. Hopefully it produces money. That's kind of the point of it, right? So it is an income producing asset. And that makes it more complicated, particularly when both spouses are working in the business, right? It's less complicated when it's one party that's working in the business. They're going to get the business, and then we have to talk about the proceeds that come from the business and how that impacts it. But if you have both spouses that are working in the business, and both spouses are key to working in that business, you've got a pretty dicey mix, particularly if that business is producing some good income. It's going to take some work to try to figure out how to sever that relationship. Now, truly, it's a small minority, but there are businesses that continue to exist and thrive post-divorce with both parties working in the business. Those are some pretty enlightened people that can do that. We don't see that often. But there are ways to work through that. It has to do with some soul searching. It has to do with some number crunching. It has to do with figuring out really where you see your life going, what your trajectory is, whether or not this object of the business fuels your passion such that it's what you want to continue with. Valuing a business for a divorce settlement can get really complicated really fast. Almost every divorce attorney worth their salt, when you're talking about a business that actually needs valuation, will recommend hiring an expert, a forensic accountant that does this sort of work. And there are 3, maybe 4 different ways to be able to value a business. All of them are perfectly valid, and the forensic accountant will decide which one they feel is going to be best. So when there's a battle between accountants and forensic experts, it'll frequently be between which method is most appropriate in the valuation. What we often see, though, are questions about business valuation where they really aren't necessary. It may well be that there's one spouse that's driving the train, that's doing the whole thing, and all of the value has to do with what they are doing rather than the assets of the business, right? So you're talking about a tremendous amount of goodwill. It becomes a very different evaluation in that situation. And often people are feeling that because it's producing a significant amount of revenue, it must be worth an awful lot. Perhaps not. Talk to an attorney about whether or not it's necessary to go through the process of business valuation in those circumstances. Prenups are tremendously valuable in protecting business assets because you've thought about it. The nature of a prenup. You're supposed to be thinking about all the possible things that could go wrong and how you want to resolve them ahead of time. Going back to the idea of good fences build good neighbors, it's tough. Usually that comes up when you're talking about a settlement agreement. Okay, the train has come off the rails there. It makes sense to be talking about how are we going to structure our lives moving forward. Prenups are a different animal, right? The train has not gone off the rails then. The train is sailing down the tracks beautifully. It's a weird time to be talking about, well, honey, what happens if things go wrong for us? So it's a hard conversation to have. But it's a good time to have that conversation. And if you have an existing business, it is a very critical time to be able to have that conversation. Honey, I've got this business. I've had it for 5 years. It's going super well. If at some point you decide to join the business, that would be lovely. Let's talk about the specifics of that when we get to that. But right now, I would like our agreement to be, and that's the prenuptial agreement, I would like our agreement to be that it is my business. And regardless of what happens in the marriage, and regardless of what happens, God forbid, in the divorce, it will remain my business. So if you have a business interest leading into a marriage, you want a prenup, hands down, no questions asked. The way you handle business debt in divorce is much like you handle debt having to go with any other asset, right? I want the washer and dryer. Cool. Do you owe money on the washer and dryer? This doesn't come up often, so it may not be a good example. Yes, we owe $300 a month on the washer and dryer. Okay, if you want the washer and dryer, you take the $300 debt. Comes up more often on a car, right? I want the Mustang. Okay, $700 a month on the Mustang. Do you want to take the $700? I don't want the $700 a month debt. Then you aren't taking the Mustang. So if there is debt in the business, who's taking the business? It's a part of what makes the business valued at what the business is valued at. And so whoever's taking that business is also taking the debt. So if you own a business, and if you are facing the eventuality or perhaps in the midst of a divorce, give us a call at the Manili firm. We'll look into it. We'll fix it. We're here to help.